There's a lot of yeses in my life that helped me turn corners and open doors, and there's a lot of no's that also opened doors and helped me turn corners, and they all cumulatively got me to this point in life, and I wouldn't change anything going backwards. I might not have said some mean stuff or, done some things in life, but all of the key moments in my life led me to where I am now, and that's exactly where I want to be.
From Fiore Communications, it's How I Got Here, a show of inspiring stories from Tallahassee area leaders, business owners, and neighbors, all the challenges, opportunities, inspirations, the twists and turns of life that led them to where they are today. Everyone has a story worth telling, and I am really grateful that we get to bring a few of them to you. I truly have been changed by my conversations with these amazing people, and I'm confident you will be too. I'm Dave Fiore, and in this episode, I speak with Charlie Strickland, CEO and co-owner of Talon Training Group. A native of nearby Marianna, Charlie shares his journey from the FSU Police Department and working at the family farm to building a reputation as the MacGyver of the Leon County Sheriff's Office. While climbing the ranks at LCSO, he earned an MBA from Florida State to bolster his resume for a high-ranking administrative position that he would be passed over for. But he turned that disappointment into a life-changing opportunity that continues to evolve today. Charlie shares his thoughts on running for sheriff in 2016 and the time he was caught driving a motorcycle after consuming too many Monster energy drinks. He also talks about the power of relationships and getting involved in the community, including how a trip to the Florida Public Safety Institute with his Leadership Tallahassee class led to buying the land for Talon Range. We talk about how Charlie started his radio and podcasting career, the responsibilities of gun ownership, and the impact of training more than 80,000 people to safely carry a firearm. We started our conversation talking about growing up in Jackson County.
My roots there, my one side of family, the Tony's Restaurants was this landmark, this part of Marianna back to the 40s and 50s, and my Papa Tony Primavera, my mother's father, was in that. That was, sort of a given. And my grandfather on the other side was in the meat business, and my dad got into farming. He's a Vietnam veteran, a bunch of awards and Purple Hearts, Bronze Star, that kind of thing. And, I wasn't wearing members only. Back in the day, I was wearing I
had a jacket.
They also ran stuff, but it was, but my parents provided everything that I wanted. They worked hard. My mom was a school teacher in Sneeds, and obviously there was a time they parted ways in my teenage years, and as happens. But I was from a loving family. Everything was good. I have a lot of great childhood memories. I've got a brother lives here in town. He's an attorney at a local law firm, a statewide law firm. You get to a point where you look around and you have a strong work ethic, because as soon as I could reach the clutch pedals on the tractor, Daddy quit taking me fishing and started putting me to work.
Put you to work. Yeah.
And so I was the one. I've got a work ethic that comes from that. And but I never really I wanted to be a lawyer, then I didn't. And then I wanted
So why'd you want to be a lawyer?
Well, my Uncle Herman was head public defender over there, and Herman was president of Cattlemen's Association, lived on the Big Hill, bought all this land. He was and he is still one of the more successful people in that area, and he was my uncle, and that's where we went to I wanted to farm like Daddy. I wanted to teach like Mama.
But you wanted his stuff.
But I wanted to have a lot of money like Herman, and so I wanted to do it all at once. And it just – but when I sort of bumbled my way through college at FSU, my grade point average wasn't that great. So while I took the LSAT and did quite well on the test, I just didn't have the grade point average as a traditional student.
Right.
And while I got accepted into some law schools elsewhere, I just didn't want to leave. And by that time, I had stumbled around just looking for insurance and benefits and retirement, and ended up in law enforcement as a default. I used to run around from the police trying to hide from them and, do stupid stuff like ride golf carts around the city of Marianna, hiding from the police, and, when my buddies chasing me and doing stupid stuff when we were in college.
So you knew where to look when you became law enforcement later, right?
There are people who serve their whole career in the sheriff's office and police in different places in law enforcement that I had over a barrel earlier in their lives and decided to give them a break because I had been there, done that.
Yeah.
And went, you seem like a good guy, good kid or whatever. And
just knock it off, right?
Let's pour that out, or let's do this, or let's do that.
Yeah.
And they ended up in this career following suit, and they worked for. I know one in particular that worked for me later on.
Yeah.
And
so, what was it like at FSU being on the FSU police force?
If I heard once, I heard a bunch of times. So, why are you taking me to the real jail? Aren't you just an FSU cop?
Yeah, just an FSU.
Like, yeah. You didn't commit just an FSU crime. So
right.
It was. We got involved in a lot of stuff.
So you were back on the golf carts then.
We were on the golf carts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I was fixing to say. We were on the golf carts. There's stories about us, doing things on golf carts that should not be done on golf carts on the midnight shift. And actually, there were a few of us, Randy Hunter and I and a couple others, that started pulling bicycles out of evidence, and that were, had been recovered or seized and were going to be auctioned or destroyed, and started riding bikes around campus. That was the first bicycle patrol.
Okay.
It was before Tallahassee Police Department started their bike patrol. We were using, whatever we could. I remember riding this chrome, mountain bike around campus, and we showed up with shorts on one time and an FSU T-shirt, and Chief Tanner's like, "Oh, who authorized that?" Like, well, I kept getting my polyester pants caught in the bicycle chain, Chief, and those pants are expensive. I just figured this is a better solution. Well, that's probably a good idea. And who authorized those T-shirts? Well, you got on us about riding around in plain clothes. You wanted people not to see the gun flapping under our shirt, and so we figured we might better be identifiable. So we got some FSU police T-shirts made up. Well, that's not a bad idea. It was one of those forgiveness, not permission kind of deals. Yeah. And it was a good time.
So the bikes gave you better access, could get around easier?
Oh, yeah. Way better than golf carts, way better than foot patrol, and it kept us in shape. And you'd ride right up on people smoking weed at, outside a fraternity or somewhere. And, I've eased up right in front of the main gate. On the concrete steps out there on one of those little walls that all the sororities and fraternities paint up. And pulled up next to a young man, a young girl, just sitting there smoking weed. And I pulled up and sat on the sidewalk on a little wall next to him and said, "How y'all doing tonight?" And it's pretty good, man. You want to hit? I'm like, yeah, no, man, I'm on duty. Huh? I showed him the badge, and he's like, "Man, that sucks." So, it was a good time. We worked. We arrested people for armed robbery coming out. A lot of people don't understand what goes on, but it's, not to frighten anybody whose kids go there. But if when people go, I'm sending my kids, and I say, okay, where are they going to live? Which school are they going to? Because there's a lot of things they need to understand. It's not a dangerous place by any means, but it's certainly a place to be careful.
There's stuff going on.
And the FSU police are real cops.
Right.
And they do real work. They have some slow times, but it was a good time. I finally left to go to the sheriff's office because they told me if you're going to do the kind of work you're doing, you need to go work for the sheriff's office. And TPD wouldn't hire me, but the sheriff's office snapped me right up.
Why wouldn't TPD hire you?
I don't want to say anything unpopular, but at the time, if you looked like me, you had to have a 3.5 GPA in criminology or more and a bachelor's degree in order to be competitive.
Okay.
And that was what it was. That was what was explained to be some of the people doing the background checks and entry. Were the gatekeepers.
Okay.
And said, "Charlie, you're not cut out to work here." Right now, I knew I could have stepped right into the role. I knew their people. I knew their policy. Yeah, it's just one of those things where.
But you fit in better with the sheriff's office.
Sheriff's office picked me right up. I walked in, got introduced to Under Sheriff Larry Campbell, and was told in that first meeting that I was going to get a job, but I had to go through the overboard process. He said, "You've got a college degree?" "Yes, sir." "Do you want to come work here?" "Yes, sir." "You're willing to take about a $3,000 or $4,000 a year pay cut?" "Yes, sir." "Why?" I said, "I want to work for a real law enforcement agency. I'm tired of working on 400 or 500 acres. I want to, if I'm going to do this for a living, I want to do it. Plus, I've watched the SWAT team rappel onto rooftops and stuff around here, and I really want to do that." And he goes, "Okay, well, when do you want to tell them you're coming to work here?" And it was just that quick. And it was probably there's a lot of yeses in my life that helped me turn corners and open doors. And there's a lot of no's that also opened doors and helped me turn corners. And they all cumulatively got me to this point in life. And I wouldn't change anything going backwards. I might not have said some mean stuff or, done some things in life, but all of the key moments in my life led me to where I am now. And that's exactly where I want to be. So those career moves, I tell young cops, young people in any career now, if you didn't get that bank loan or you didn't get that promotion or you didn't get this, it's probably meant to be.
I was going to say that's a great way to encourage younger people to saying, hey, this isn't the disaster you might think it is, right?
Yeah.
Because it's going to lead to something.
And I had people tell me it's just not your time right now. And I had worked my butt off to get to the point where I felt like it was. And it wasn't. I mean, when I finished the law enforcement academy in Jackson County and I was standing there at the graduation, John McDaniel, the sheriff there, his daughter, Michelle, was married to Larry Campbell, my sheriff later in life. And I said, "Sheriff," he goes, "Well, what can I do to help you, son?" I said, "Well, Sheriff, I graduated academy. I'm one of your reserve deputies. I'm ready to go to work." He goes, "Well, how much time do you have to finish your 4-year degree?" And I said, "I got about 20 hours, something like that." And he said, "Well, you go on over to Tallahassee and get your degree. And when you're done, if you still want to come back here, I'll hire you. But I'm not hiring you until you go finish college." And I said, "There's very few people in your agency have a degree. Why do I need a degree?" He goes, "No, because you can, and I'm not going to hire you. I can hire somebody else. I'm not going to hire you because you have the potential to do more."
Right.
And that just, I knew he was trying to do the right thing, but I was mad and I was hurt, and he was right. And so I got a job at FSU Police and finished my degree. And in 94, when I left Leon County to go back to Jackson County to help my family out, because I needed to go home and take control of the farm and I needed to help, with some situations over there, he hired me right off the bat to go back home. And he said, "You did what I asked and love to have you here." A year later, everything was squared away. I wanted to come back to Leon County. He said, "What can we do to keep you?" And I told him, and he said, "Those are all great ideas, but we're not there yet."
Right.
And, so I came back over, and Larry Campbell and Sheriff Boone brought me right back into the fold again and put me right back to work like I'd never left. Arguably, I probably missed out on a few moves because of my longevity, but I went back in my 40s and got my MBA from FSU because I wanted to be the chief financial officer for the sheriff's office because I knew that Major Scott Bukotic was leaving. And it took me 2.5 years to go to night school at FSU and get my master's in business. And then after I got it, Scott decided to leave. And they announced who they were going to hire, and it wasn't me. And I went to the sheriff and I said, "Boss, I just met, I went my first night to class when my current wife of 23 years now was at the hospital having my third child, her first, and I left the hospital to go to my first college class to work on my MBA when I was 40. And she made me go. She goes, "If you don't go, you're not gonna go." And I said, "Okay, honey, I'll leave if you make me," and went to class. But then I went to the sheriff when I heard what was going to happen, and I said, "Boss, I want that job.
Yeah,
told you I wanted a job." And she said, "Well, we'll do an oral board, and we'll interview some people." So they did. And from the people on the board, they said, "You did really well, Charlie, but he's still hiring the other guy." And, there again, I was heartbroken because of all the time and all the effort and all the things I had put forward at that age with, then 3 kids.
You made sacrifices. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, why, it's not fair. It's not fair. I didn't get that. But the sheriff after the oral board and they made the announcement, I went in and sat down with Sheriff Campbell and said, "Boss, what's up? I mean, what did I do? And he goes, listen, I can get somebody to balance my checkbook. You're running my SWAT team. You know, I'd been through the SWAT team, worked my way up the chain. He goes, I need you making those decisions out there. You're critical to me there. I need you there, not in here. He said, you're really not that. Yeah, I know what you can do, but what I need you to do, what the agency and the county needs you to do is to stay over there doing this. He goes, is there something else I can help you with? And I said, well, just so happens that my best friend JD and I are trying to build a gun. I said, I've been doing some firearms training. He goes, yeah. I said, we want to build a gun range. And he goes, well, what do you need? I said, I need an investor. I need about 24 investors. We need to borrow money because cops don't have resources. The bank will back us with an SBA loan. At the time, it was a credit union we were using, but we need the down payment. And he goes, well, how much do you need? And I told him, and he wrote me a check for twice that. Wow. Handed it to me and said, I believe in you. You are destined for certain things. Right. And
so how do you feel at the time? I mean, I know you were disappointed, but did you accept that maybe you were where you were supposed to be?
When I was at the sheriff's, at that point when I knew I wasn't getting that promotion, because that would have gone from sergeant to major. I mean, that would have been a huge leap for me. Right. And, I later made lieutenant. I didn't work my way any higher than that at the sheriff's office because, as one of my majors told me once upon a time, after we were both retired and trying to build our friendship afterwards, he says, Charlie, you were a pain in the rear end to manage. And I said, yeah, I know. He goes, you always came in with ideas. And he goes, I'll tell you now, most all of them were good ideas. He said, but we didn't want to hear them. It wasn't the time, and you had access to the sheriff because I was the armorer for the agency, and I could walk into the sheriff's office at any point in time with pretty much anything I want to talk about. And I had a direct line to him, so I had some insight, and I was able to give him some insight. And some of the people didn't like it.
I do want to ask this question. You mentioned being the armorer for the Leon County Sheriff's Office. I don't know what that is. What is that role?
Okay. So most agencies that can afford to have dedicated personnel, there's always somebody responsible for the guns. Right. Even Navy SEALs have to go check out guns. There's a guy behind the cage in the movie just handing them everything. Right. That's an armorer. Okay. An armorer is typically certified to work on firearms. It's not a gunsmith. They're not like cutting off barrels and stuff, but they're taking things apart, putting them together, maintaining, replacing parts, diagnosing malfunctions. When I got a call one day and said, I thought I was getting promoted, but I wasn't. So I was still a deputy. And they said, hey, you've got, they ragged me on the SWAT team because I was always like working on things. I'm very mechanically inclined. Okay. I grew up on a farm, limited resources.
Yeah, you got to figure stuff out, right?
Figure out how to fix it with duct tape and baling wire, that kind of deal. And except it was electric fence wire and stuff like that. But, you're trying to figure things out. And I sort of earned a reputation in the agency of being the MacGyver on the team. We needed something. I was like, well, see if Charlie can make something. And there's funny stories, different apparatuses that worked and didn't work. And I was, sort of I forget what that little cartoon is where the little stuff comes out of his hat and does all that stuff. I would. Oh yeah, Inspector Gadget. Yeah, Inspector Gadget. Yeah. I would create things and I go, hey, this is going to work. And, sometimes they did, and sometimes they didn't. So a quick story: we had. We wanted to create something where we could put flashbangs, distraction devices. You see them in the movies. They pull the pin, they throw it in. It's not a fragmentation grenade. It's loud, makes a bright flash. There's about 4 pounds of overpressure, concussion, and a lot of dBs of sound that's supposed to distract you so that a SWAT team can make an entry into a room. Yeah. But throwing it into a room sometimes is dangerous because there's kids in cribs and there's different things. You have to be able to see what you're doing. So Gene Revel, who was our commander at the time, says, can we make a device, a stick where you can put a flashbang on the end of it and activate it on the stick? And I said, absolutely. I went to Lowe's, and I'd walk around Lowe's for hours with a project in mind. Still do it today. And I got a piece of pipe, and I ran a cable down inside the pipe and out, and I made a loop on the end of the cable with a trigger so you could pull it and hold it. And I made a piece of metal, angle iron on the other end that would hold the flashbang. And you'd clip on the flashbang, tighten it up with some hose clamps, and and you stick it in a window and pull the pin, it'd go boom, but you still had control of it. You break the window with it, stick it in the window, boom, pull it back out. And, the risk to injury was much smaller. It's probably still in one of the vehicles at the sheriff's office now.
Yeah. And
so I also decided to go one step further, one on an extension pole that goes up in the air. And, so we could get to the second floor. Yeah. And I couldn't figure that one out. But I had a prototype. And so we got out SWAT training one day, and Gene says, hey, let's demonstrate that bank stick. I got it out. We set up in front of the old storefront there, an old vacant building, or just the front of it, like an old cowboy front. And we got in the stick, line of us, and I reached around and stuck it in the door, pulled the thing, went boom, flawless. He goes, man, that's awesome. Let's see you use the other one. I said, boss, that one's not really ready to go yet. He goes, well, let's see see if you can make it work. Well, I didn't have the cable thing because it had to be extended, figured out. So I had some string, some parachute cord, same thing. But I had it coiled up in my hand, and I had the stick. We got up there, had the pole in my hand, got in the stick. I extended. It came time to team leader control, execute, and I extended the pole. You know how a painter's pole, you just twist it and extend it out? Well, I extended the pole, but I held on to the string.
So it set it off.
So it pulled the pin. And now the flashbang is literally a foot in front of my face. And I heard it go tink. I never heard it go tink before. And I looked and I saw the little striker had gone over. I said, and it shoots all the flames out two ends of it. And I went, that's not good. And there was another deputy in front of me and there was a deputy behind me, and I couldn't do anything with it. I threw it straight up in the air, right above my head. And I heard it go boom. And I felt heat coming down on me from the flames. And I'm like, whew. I turned around, I looked at Mike Halligan in front of me and Shannon Black behind me. Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Everybody's okay? All right, great. And then the whole team walks up and they said, what happened? And so I squatted down to pick it up and show them what I had done wrong. And I heard a couple of them start to chuckle. Well, I had these eye protection, our goggles on, and then there's this big fat strap like people skiing, where this big fat strap goes around my head, but I didn't have a hat on or a helmet, which I should have had on. Well, apparently, and so my head started kind of stinging a little bit, and I rubbed my hand across the top of my head, and I looked at my hand, and I had hair in my hand. So
caught on fire.
What had happened was I melted the hair off the top of my head. Kept my eyebrows and my eyelashes, but the hair on the top of my head, as you can see here, it's all still gone. Should have been a workers' comp issue.
I was going to say, that's pretty severe.
So I was driving a van that day. I had to go to the barbershop, went to Seminole Barbershop.
To clean it up?
And drove in with the SWAT van and walked in. And there was a line, and I knew the barber and said, what's going on, Charlie? I said, I need you to fix this. And he goes, oh. Yeah, as soon as that gentleman's done, and that gentleman said, no, son, you go ahead and go first. You need it worse than me. Oh, man.
Wow.
I see it's stuff like that just made all those years and all the stress and all the mess.
And I'm sure they didn't let you forget. I'm sure they didn't let you forget it.
No. And then I still tell these stories. There's so many of them, it's obvious. And that's, but a culmination of things like that and all the great cases we made. I mean, I went as far in the sheriff's office. Had I stayed when I hit 25 years, had I not decided to run for sheriff, I would have stayed another 5 years, went in the drop program, and would have arguably been there with all of my peers, at captain, major chief. That's something. I would have done something under the new sheriff. But that's not the decision I made.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. You running for sheriff in 2016. What led to you wanting to run for office?
Well, we all knew Sheriff Campbell's health was not good, and he had made the announcement he was going to retire. I'd always want to go back to Jackson County and run in my hometown, which I will not do as long as the current sheriff's in office. I love him to death. He's doing a great job. And but some things had happened. I had done other things. I went to the Leadership Tallahassee, class 29. It was the greatest class ever.
I'm sure.
And
they all are.
No, just us. And I'd gotten to know some people, which is how we started our range and did things, and the networks that were built in this community through organizations like that.
Right.
That class introduced me to so many people. and the networks that I was able to build and the conversations I was able to have with going back to school and getting that degree in the end, and getting to know the people that I knew, just a long list of people that were in key positions, and then meeting their friends. And all of a sudden I was able to go pretty much anywhere in town and I'd know somebody.
Right.
And that was awesome. But it also built a confidence level, and it built a knowledge base that I hadn't had, and was able to see things from a different perspective. You know, that's why you never stop. You never just say, okay, I'm good with what I got. You just keep, you know, pushing. And, you know, we knew that my friend Mike Wood was going to run, and that the Walt McNeil was going to run, and we knew Tommy was going to run again. The main race was going to be in the Democratic primary. And in talking to some people, we knew that the polling was not, you know, Walt McNeil was going to carry the Democratic nomination. We knew that. And I talked to Mike years before, said, hey, when you get ready to run for sheriff, you know, I support you, but you need to run as something other than a Democrat. So I ran, and my goal was not to go toe-to-toe with Mike or toe-to-toe with it. It was to see who came out of that. Mm-hmm. And whoever came out of that, then I would be running me against one person. And I wanted to carry Sheriff Campbell's legacy forward. You know, he had cancer. He passed away. I sat in my driveway in tears for a long time when I heard that, because he is one of the most influential people in my career. The day of qualification, I had all the signature cards. So did Mike, so did everybody else. And I'm assuming that, you know, they went to looking at the polling and saw where things were and decided, you know, for whatever reason, everybody except Walt jumped in as independents. So now we had 3 independents running. So we were all going to go to the final race, which was not my game plan.
Messed up your plan.
It was not my game plan. And our consultants told me, Charlie, you don't have a chance. If you stay independent, you don't have a chance, because you're just going to fall into the crowd. If I said, well, I'm a registered Republican, I can switch to the Republican Party today as long as I do it by filing time. It cost me like $8,000 out of my savings account. I loaned the campaign my money, and I was retired and out of the sheriff's office by then. And I went down and I paid to file and to switch to qualify, which, you know, really, really sucked. But they said, you know, there was a good chance, depending on how people interpreted it. It didn't work out. I did come in second behind Walt, but only a percentage or two above Mike. Looking back, knowing the outcome of the race, would I run again? Absolutely, 110%, because there are still people that walk in my office and in my business and come in there and go, you're going to run again? We'd love to see you run again. I moved out of the county to make sure I don't have any opportunity to run. I'm gone. I'm out. I moved to Jackson County, live on our farm that I grew up farming, and
right.
I'm done with all that. But, you know, it was a fantastic experience, and I encourage anybody who feels like they can make a difference, and I really felt like I could make a difference.
And we'll be right back. How I Got Here is sponsored by Barano Heating and Air Conditioning in Tallahassee. I've been friends with Patrick Barano since we met in a chamber leads group about 15 years ago. I'll admit that I pursued him pretty hard to be his marketing firm and eventually won him over. And the reason I wanted to work with him is that I was already a customer and I knew what kind of company he and his father before him had built. He cares about his customers, he cares about his team, and he cares about this community. I've experienced Barano Heating and Air when they installed a complete system replacement a few years ago, and I enjoy peace of mind and same-day service with my Total Comfort Service Agreement. I've also been behind the scenes at their office and seen firsthand the true character of this company. And that's why we're so proud to represent them. To learn more or to schedule an appointment online anytime, visit baranoac.com. They really always will be there for you. And now back to the show. So before we move on to Talon, which is, I'm going to ask you a few things about that because that's a significant part of your life today. I did want to ask about the Capital City Challenge because I know that was something that you had done and was important to you.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So I'd almost forgotten about that. So when I was in the motor unit, I'd gone into I was a sergeant on the road, and it was one of these things where we're going to move people around a little bit. And they said, we're going to put you in the special operations section. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? I said, well, it's in the traffic unit. Yeah, there's 2 sergeants over there, and one of them, they're both on motorcycles, and So I got the opportunity to go into that unit as a sergeant along with co-sergeant David Fiore, go through the motor school, compete in some motorcycle rodeos, there's little slow speed cone riding stuff, which is what the Cap City Challenge was.
Had you ridden a motorcycle much before that?
No, I'd never ridden a motorcycle before. I went and bought one and went through Al Wofford's motorcycle school over in Jefferson County at the time and got my endorsement and bought a motorcycle, much to my wife's disappointment and several threats to leave me. But I rolled the dice and I won.
And she's still with you, right?
I don't have one anymore because she was serious the last time I brought it up.
Yeah.
Somehow or another, I guess because I'd had that business degree, got me on as the treasurer on the board. Mm-hmm. And we turned that into a bona fide nonprofit 501c3, went through all the paperwork and all the hoops.
Sounds like a good thing. Gave a chance to compete, skills and put on a good show and raise money for the Special Olympics.
Yeah, that's where I discovered Monster energy drinks. First time one of our sponsors gave us a bunch of those green Monsters, and I didn't read the can. Dave Farkas and Andy Dawson handed me one morning and said, "Hey man, you got to try this. It'll get you. It's like got a lot of caffeine in it." And so I drank one, and then I said, "Man, that was pretty good." I ended up drinking a second one. And I'm on my third one in about 45 minutes, getting ready to go out and ride. And I noticed my hand was shaking.
Yeah.
And I said, "What?" And Dave said, "How many of those did you drink?" And I said, I think this is number 3. Dave, why? And he goes, "Oh, dude, did you read the can?" I said, "No." He goes, "That's 2 servings." And I said, "So?" He goes, "You're only supposed to have 2 servings in like a day, in 24 hours. And this is the original ones that came out.
Right.
And I was out there sitting on a motorcycle and I was going, whoa, 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 with my hand. I couldn't hold my hand still. And I'm like, yeah. So now I read things.
Yeah, it's an important lesson to learn.
I'm surprised I didn't die.
Yeah, give your heart a challenge. I want to talk about Talon and the family of companies associated with that name. So I know it's more, most people probably know about the range, but I know it's security, a lot of training, a lot going on there. So just kind of give us a quick overview of what the whole Talon business family is.
Well, JD and I started Talon to teach civilians firearms. It was just supposed to be us teaching.
Okay.
Teaching.
And JD Johnson, your co-owner?
Yep. His people back home know him as David Johnson. It was JD Johnson. We met each other at FSU Police back in the day. We were in an incident once upon a time. I, to this day, believe he saved my life in a situation we were involved in. I mean, he was my best friend, still is my best friend. Our skill sets complement each other. He's better with gun knowledge. I've got the books handled. We work together. But we were teaching, and he said, "Hey, man," I'd finished my MBA or was finishing my MBA, and he said, I think I taught a class in so-and-so's backyard the other day. I think, this might be an opportunity for us. And I said, that sounds pretty cool. We don't teach civilians. We just teach cops. And he goes, well, there's nobody out there really doing it. And so we put together this little company. I said, we're going to form an LLC. This is how it's going to work. And so we went and put some business cards out at Kevin's. And Kevin Kelly's always been a big supporter of ours. And
it was Talon Training, right?
It was Talon Training Group, LLC. That is still the parent company today.
Okay.
We're doing that for a while, and it started growing and growing and growing. We have trained over 80,000 people in this region to carry firearms, concealed firearms, not counting our other classes in law enforcement training. Over 14, 15 years, 80,000 plus with us and our other instructors. A lot of people.
Yeah.
And then we decided at some point to build a gun range, and I just talked about that earlier. We went around, found investors, and did a business plan, and I actually found the property going to the Leadership Tallahassee Public Safety Day out at Pat Thomas. I'm in there with J.R. Long, and he said, "Aren't you trying to build a gun range?" And I said, "Yeah, J.R." He goes, "Why don't you buy that piece of property?"
Coming off the interstate. And
I said, "We could never afford that." He goes, "Oh, yeah, you could." And so that's why we're there, was because of that trip, because of LT 29.
On your way to Pat Thomas.
Absolutely. This is how all these things come together over time, and you just don't know why. You don't know at the time, but you just have to be open to them and work the networks and never turn an opportunity down.
So did you know anything? I mean, building a gun range, you have to know what you're doing, right? I mean, you got to keep people safe.
I Googled it. And so, no, I went to the NRA's website. See, JD and I, the sheriff's office is the armorer who was responsible for issuing the guns and taking care of the guns. And I ended up with 3 or 4, 5 different assistant armorers working for me over the years.
Right.
And some of those are running the program now. The sheriff I would put in, hey, I want to go to SHOT Show in Orlando, or the SHOT Show in Vegas, or I want to go here or there. I need to go to this school, this networking. I need to go look at new sniper rifles for the agency. And so he would send me to do those things. Well, I can't help that knowledge is in me. I get to use it for whatever I want to. I use it for the agency. But then again, that's how most people in their retirement end up as being consultants and whatever is they did something, they took that information and they turned it into a career move.
Yeah.
We're doing the training with civilians. It turned into the range. We bought the 2.8 acres there between Peterbilt and the hotel there on the off-ramp at 192 and went back and found another round of investors or lenders, which they're all paid off now, except for like 3 or 4 that are really close to us. A year and a half ago, we had a gentleman up in Dothan who had been building a range in the same time we were building our range. He was building one. He wasn't happy with the offerings in that region. He offered it to us at a very fair price. We bought it, and we finished it. We now have a pro shop up there. We Class 3 dealer. We do all that in Dothan just like we do here. Our area of expertise is more or less training, self-defense weapons, guns, some hunting stuff, but, everything from thermal to silencers. And we do a good business in both locations. The Dothan one is growing. Somewhere along the line, right after the election, separately from Talon Range and Talon Training and JD and I's business, some of the people I had been doing some consulting on site safety and security, and we do a lot of that. We've done pro bono stuff for churches, and we had 600 people from different houses of worship out at the Antique Car Museum one time. Had Preston Scott emceeing the thing for us, and JD and I got up and spoke, and so many different houses of worship we've gone into in the community, churches, temples, whatnot, and helped with over the years. But I had some businesses approach me and say, hey, what would it take to get you? Why don't you do some security work for us? Since you're not the sheriff, we want somebody we can call and make things happen. And I got into it. When my wife and I started that company, she's the majority owner of Talon Security, which then later on purchased Plantation Security, which is a staple in the northeast part of the county and throughout South Georgia. It's a juggling act, honestly. I'm in Dothan some days. I live in Marianna. I'll be in Dothan the day after we record this. I'm in Tallahassee today.
Yeah.
I never know some mornings which way I'm going.
Yeah, I bet. Let me ask you an easy question here. And with so many people owning guns, most of them legally, why is it so important to spend time at the range, to practice? If you want to own a gun, and especially if you want to carry a gun, why is that part of the responsibility of doing that?
Too many people today feel like they need the means for self-protection, and they go out and they will buy a gun. And then they feel that it's a good luck charm. It's a talisman to them. It's something that, well, I have it now. I feel better. I have a gun. I have a gun in the house. Okay. And then they don't practice. They're not properly trained. They don't know what they're doing. They don't understand the law. They don't understand what they can and cannot do. They don't get that information. They don't talk to someone who knows. They just roll the dice, and hope nothing's ever going to happen. And, even if they decide I'm going to carry it in my car, but they don't understand the law. The first thing is understanding what you can and cannot do with that thing you just bought, that deadly weapon,
right,
that is capable of turning the meekest person in the world into a killer with the pull of a little trigger. If you don't get the right information and you don't understand where you stand as far as the law goes, stand your ground, castle doctrine, all those issues, what constitutes lethal force, or when can you justify it in a public place or in your home? Those things are key, and we teach our classes around that stuff and have been for many years.
Yeah,
and we'll answer those questions for free if somebody calls. It's just what we do. And the flip side is knowing when you can and when you can't is being able to safely. Can you pick that thing up under stress? Because most people buy a gun, and a counter will show them how to load the magazine, show them how to load the gun, and they take that thing. But then they get into a situation where they are experiencing what's called critical incident stress. It's a phrase coined by Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, who's written books like On Combat and On Killing. Primarily, how do you train human beings to do this type of stuff under this type of stress? And there's physiological and psychological stress dynamics that go into these. So you end up with increased rate of breathing and increased heart rate and tunnel vision, auditory exclusion, critical incident amnesia, vasoconstriction, the things that happen to our bodies. We lose fine motor skills. We lose the ability to critically think. We react. We're using the limbic portion of our brain, the midbrain, not the forebrain, not the conscious thinking portion. That part of the brain takes a time out and just turns it over to our autonomous system, basically. So if you're driving down the road and a deer jumps in front of your car, you don't have to think about the velocity and the force, and you just think, oh, and your foot hits the brake, because that's what your brain has been programmed to do when there's an obstruction. You need to be able to shoot the same way, and the only way that happens is to come to the range and go through the motions, and then unload your gun and go through the motions. You can do it at home. You just have to make sure everything's unloaded. But you have to program yourself. You have to teach yourself. You have to learn those skills. And you don't have to be able to do a fast reload with a semi-automatic or a tactical versus a combat reload, and all that stuff that we get into will show you those skills. But at the same time, you really only need to be able to draw the firearm from a position wherever it's stored and understand where you can and cannot store one. Even with the new laws, it's not just carte blanche permission to just do whatever you want with a gun.
Right.
I always use this phrase, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right.
I go back to what I said earlier about law enforcement. I can't tell you how many people I could have shot, and been totally justified. Grand jury would have cleared me, but we roll the dice and we take that chance and we hope it works out for the best, because, it's just not the right thing to do at that time. Although it's legally justified doesn't mean it's right. And, what we're trying to do is to build a protector class of people who are able to protect themselves and the people around them.
That's great. You've mentioned your wife, Donna, but I want to just kind of talk about her a little bit, because I know she's an important part of your story, right? So how...
Go ahead.
All right.
She said, don't talk about me.
All right. Well, how did you guys meet?
So my wife, Donna, was I think the first time I probably laid eyes on her, she was in middle school or high school walking across the street at Florida High, and I was an FSU cop. There's about 9 years difference between us, 9.5. But she says, yeah, you must have been. I said, yeah, I was probably one of those guys sitting there watching traffic in the mornings. And so she yeah, he saw me when I said, no, I didn't. No, I wouldn't have recognized you. But we met. She was a relatively new dispatcher at the sheriff's office. Okay. In the communications section. And I was a property detective, brand new detective, just coming in off the road. Met her in the hallway, and I said something gruff to her, poking fun at her, and she didn't like it. And then she came into dispatch, or brought some printouts upstairs to behind my desk, and I ragged her about, well, you don't have anything for me? And so, yeah, it was me being a smart butt, and her saying, who is this idiot? And as time went on, I wore her down. And
so not exactly a love at first sight kind of story?
Not on her side, no. And and so a couple years later, I ended up being a robbery detective. And our first date, I was a robbery detective with the robbery task force stationed out of the Tallahassee Police Department. We had 2 detectives and 2 investigators from the 2 agencies working together is how it used to work. Right. I'd work city cases, county cases, same thing on their side. And to our first date, I was on call, and we went to the Longhorn Steakhouse in North Monroe, and we just finished dessert. And she ate like I ate, and I was really happy with that, because she ate steak, she ate, the whole 9 yards. I'm like, that's my kind of woman right here. I had to take her home, which was right down the street, and then drive like 2 blocks away to an auto parts house that had been robbed. And that was our first, and we ended up solving that case, and that was a good sign. Her roommate, we're recording this show, her roommate at that time is retiring from the Tallahassee Police Department today. This is her last day in uniform. Wow. We dated for a while, and, within a year we were getting married, and she made a great mother to her stepchildren, my first 2 children. And then years later, we had a couple more. Mm-hmm. I've got a 14-year-old, 15, fixing to be 16 next month, year-old daughter, and my son just turned 12. I've been so blessed, and she's stuck with me all these years, and being in law enforcement and dispatch, and she's she got hired out of, she went to the CDA over there when they formed that thing, and then went back to the sheriff's office as to work in special operations, which is where I used to work. And she got hired out to go back to Jackson County and work somewhere else doing something else. And she doesn't like me to talk much about what she's doing nowadays, but it was one of those things where, honey, you can do something with your career and really cap it off and do something that you can be proud of and make a huge difference for people, or you can stay over here and keep doing what you're doing. And she chose the challenging path, and is making a real difference. And I'm very proud of her for doing that. And, I love her endlessly. And, it's, and I am no easy case. I'm not, I'm a tough one. When she's out of town, I kind of like, I don't need to hang out with people because I need my wife here to keep me straight, just to keep me from being a butthole.
Yeah. All right, well, we're getting close to wrapping things up. I did want to acknowledge, you mentioned it earlier, but you're also a fellow podcaster and a radio personality, right? So tell us about that part of your life. You probably did not imagine yourself doing that at some point.
No. Preston Scott reached out to me before the election, before any of that stuff, when we were doing the training thing. And he reached out and said, hey, would you be interested in coming on my show and talking about some personal safety issues on Wednesday? And I said, sure. I was honored. Preston was a guy that when I'd go to sheriff's office back in the day, the bosses were like, did you hear what Preston said this morning? I can't believe, oh, man, what are we going to do? And they were trying to formulate a response to what Preston had talked about, some critical issue. And, we need to get some guys out there. We need to slow traffic down because we need to do this, we need to do that. And so I'm like, I don't know who this guy is, but apparently he's steering policy in this organization. And then get invited to go up there. And, man, we just hit it off. And it turned into a every other week thing, and has been that way for a long 8 years or longer, 9 years, 10 years. It's been a long time. At some point in time, it was overwhelming for me to try to be there all the time. JD got involved, and so now they get two different perspectives, and so we split it 50-50. Somewhere along the way, they approached us. Dale Bessie, one of the sales guys up there, came to us and said, because we were doing some advertising for the Range, right? Which we weren't big believers in radio or audio. I just didn't believe into it until we got into it. Now we do. But they said, why don't y'all think about having your own show? I'm like, yeah, right. That's not what now? Really? You think that might be a hit? And he says, yeah, well, we've got this spot where people are listening to something about computers or something on the morning. And I said, yeah, I hear that every now and then. I just switch channels. He goes, yeah, that's the deal. Nobody listens to it. So if y'all pay this much, this is what it's going to be. You can get your own advertisers.
I think that was the Kim Commando show, maybe.
I might be. I don't know. Maybe you might have been one of their fans. And then
I just happened to hear it.
So it was, so they brought us in. We did a show. And I go back sometimes and listen to the original show, and I listen to the second show, and I'm like, hey, they let us come back this week, and it sounds just like it does today. We've got
it just says Talon Outdoors,
the Talon Outdoors show, and it streams on all your popular streaming platforms, and now is an actual video podcast on YouTube and Rumble. YouTube's the free one. We bring in a producer that's Preston's producer. Grant Allen to come in and do the audio, and I'm actually right now doing the video portion of it, so it's not fantastic, but it works. So it's turned into, we were at the iHeart Studios, and now we built our own studio in our office. You were there the other day. And
it's awesome.
And it's easier to do it when I can just get up from my desk, walk in there, have something, process, and go back in my office and do something else, or go wait on a customer and get everything uploaded on Fridays. We record on Fridays, and the show goes out on Saturdays, and there are 340 episodes as of right now that are out there on the streaming platform. And we talk about everything from fishing, hunting, guns, Second Amendment rights, conservative politics. So if you're not into good old boys talking about conservative issues, you don't want to listen to our show. Just don't save yourself the heartburn.
Do you enjoy doing it?
We do. And JD and I arrived at this opinion a long time ago. This is the chance during the week for two best friends who work together to sit down for 1 hour a week and just talk. I'll do the radio show as long as I'm alive, but the rest of it, I'm waiting for somebody to come along with a checkbook and go, hey,
say, hey, I want all that.
Yeah, I want all that. But in the meantime, it's, you know, we're trying to do what we can to be part of the community. There's, you know, and anybody out there listening, we'd love to talk to you about anything, any concerns you have. You know, most of it doesn't cost a dime just to talk to us.
Right. Awesome. 2 final questions.
All right.
One is, Charlie, looking back, what is one person or thing that has changed the trajectory of your life to this point?
I can't say one person or one thing, but I will tell you, like I said earlier in the show a couple of times, being told no is a key to my success. Taking the no's and rebounding and picking a different direction and staying on the path. It might not be the path that I prepared myself for. It may not be the path that I predicted or that I even wanted.
Right.
But when I'm told no or I reach an obstacle, then you can let it destroy you, or you can just keep on hustling, you know. And that's the philosophy that got me where I am today. Whether that's whatever your opinion of that may be, I am where I am because of that philosophy. I didn't always know it, but those no's are key. You know, there's doors open all the time, but sometimes the closed door is a clue, and you just gotta figure out what that means to you.
Yeah. All right, final question. The podcast is called How I Got Here. Mm-hmm. So we talked about how you got to this point in your life. Where do you think here might be for you in 3 to 5 years?
I don't want to be, I'm 57. When I'm in my 60s, I want to see the door closing on some of the things that I'm currently doing, pass those on to people who have the energy and the drive to continue those. Like, I took over businesses from people who wanted us to honor their legacy.
Right, yeah.
JD and I are kind of in that same boat where we're looking down the road at who wants to take our legacy and build from that and let us go fishing or hunting. And the same thing with security business. That's something that's a little more personal to me. That I wouldn't mind starting a completely different business that would be more local to where I live, maybe something that deals with family entertainment or something different than what I'm doing now. I mean, I'm volunteering to train cops, you know, in my local agency now just to make a difference in our community for free. I like doing that. I mean, I'm never going to be a rich guy, but I'm comfortable. I just want to, you know, I want to find ways to make a difference, and I don't know what that's going to look like. It depends on what doors open, but yeah, I mean, if I'm still doing this in 10 years, that's cool too. I mean, but I'd really like to be thinking about, I retired once. I'd really like to think about retiring again, you know, in the coming half a decade or so.
Thanks for listening to the show. You can subscribe at Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, please leave us a review. It really does make a difference. Thanks to my amazing staff at Fiore Communications, who pick up the slack while I'm working on these podcasts, and to Troy Bloom for composing our theme music. You can hear more of Troy's creations on Facebook and Instagram at Troy Bloom Music. To connect with the podcast or suggest a future guest, follow us on social media or email us at podcast@fiorecommunications.com.